Starting the 26th of April 2026 until roughly April 2029, we are entering into a period where things are picking up their supersonic speed. So I know things are going quickly already, but they're going to go even more quickly. And that's because we have three what we call generational planets moving into a configuration which will act like a pinball machine in the sky. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about these generational influences and how to link it back to your birth chart. Because in fact, this period of change has already started since 2023. And as it extends into 2029 in its intensity, we don't want to feel like it's the whole 6 years that's going to be this intense vortex. We want to be able to identify, okay, what part of my life or what part of my chart is actually being affected, and maybe in what years. My name is Deborah Lena. I'm a professional astrologer. I use Western and Vedic techniques to do birth chart readings, offer year-ahead forecasts, and relationship readings. And on this channel, I like to bring it back to the birth chart in the context of what's happening in the skies. And a lot of astrologers, a lot of great astrologers have already produced wonderful information about what's happening in these generational changes from a historical perspective, packed with a lot of historical data. This is not that video. What we are talking about today is how to link it back to your birth chart. And I find this is important because we want to better understand or better make sense of maybe what's been happening for us in these last couple of years, or maybe what to expect for the remainder of 2026. And that lets us parse out these extreme changes in the sky so that we don't feel overwhelmed, or as I like to say, we don't feel like we're a victim of the transits in the sky. And as always, these are general indicators, what we're going to be talking about. So if you do have questions about your specific birth chart or specifically what's happening in your life, please get in touch for a reading. There we will look at dasha systems and perfections and solar returns and different techniques to be more specific about what's going on in your birth chart. I hope that this video also offers an opportunity to demystify some of the things that I see floating around the internet, as well as witnessing clients come to sessions mistakenly attributing certain transits for what they're experiencing. And I think it has to do with not understanding some of the foundations before making assumptions about what's happening in astrology. One of the things that I've always been taught by astrology teachers and other types of teachers is just bringing it back to the foundation, because actually the foundation and basic information offers quite a lot of in-depth insights in a way that's often overlooked. So we're going to bring it back to these basic foundations today to understand what's happening at a collective level and how does that relate back to my birth chart, which hopefully will clarify a rather long period in which we're in this vortex. So let's bring it back to the foundation. 3 generational planets are shifting signs into fire and air within 3 years, within a short amount of time. What does that mean? Generational planets take a long time to go around the sun, and they represent movements in our civilization and in our society. So it's something like when we look back and think, do you remember that time when we used to do it this way, or when that was always happening? Those are movements that we collectively remember and experienced, and the generational planets are responsible for that. And every single time they change signs, which again, for Pluto, takes around 20 years, then we have to adapt collectively again to a change of pace. It's almost like you come home one day and someone's changed all the furniture around in your home, and you suddenly have to adapt to that, but very quickly. And after a while, you start to think, it actually wasn't so bad. Actually, that was the right thing for me. Actually, I really needed to change my furniture, or I changed the direction of my sofa, and this turned out to be better than I thought. And the generational planets act like that. There's been a lot of changing of furniture, and now we all have to figure out how to sit and how to move around the room. And why it's so important in this particular time is because when that happens with one planet, that's already a big deal. But what we're seeing is that's happening with 3 planets. So all of the furniture is essentially being moved around. And that's a lot of adaptation that we all have to do in a very short amount of time, which is, roughly 3 years that we've been experiencing this, and which will, as I said, be official once we reach the 26th of April, 2026. So we're officially going to enter into this period of rapid change. So the second reason that this is a particularly important and potent time for us is not only are these planets shifting signs, but they're also shifting into fire and air signs. And fire and air beget each other. So when you have a lot of air and a lot of fire coming together, there's more air and fire. And you will see that even when you see a lot of your friends who have Aries and Gemini in their chart versus Scorpio and Cancer, right? Or Taurus and Cancer. And the tempo at which these individuals move are naturally different. So not only do we have the planets responsible for major movements changing signs, but they're also doing it at rapid speed. And the third thing that's important and quite unique is that they're also in a special configuration, which means that they act like these pinball machines in the sky. And the energy just gets quicker and quicker and quicker. This is a very unusual situation. So we have definitely had planets in fire and air signs before, generational planets, but the fact that they're in this interesting configuration is very unique. And that's what makes this supersonic speed even faster. So when you're looking at the examples in this video, where we're going to be talking about the collective and how it relates to your birth chart, if you just have one example that aligns with your birth chart, that's already a big deal. But if you have 2 or 3, then you know that you're going through this tectonic shift. And the reason that we want to look at that is not because we need astrology to validate our experience, but it's to get a sense of how does this align with the collective timeline? How does this align with my personal timeline? How can I make sure that I take advantage of what the learnings are during this time period in a productive and healthy manner so that I don't fall victim to these transits? The first generational planet we want to talk about is Pluto. Pluto entered Aquarius already starting March 2023. It sort of peeked its head in and out until officially entering in November 2024. And remember that this planet takes 248 years to go around the sun. So we're never going to see Pluto being in Aquarius ever again. It's going to be here for about 20 years. And Pluto has a natural affinity with death and destruction and an ego death, a type of more intense transmutation. And in the sign of Aquarius, it's generally associated at a collective level with things like AI and technology, with networks that we can't see, with a shift in the vision of humanity, so like a real revolutionary type of experience. And we're seeing that at a collective level. But then when we want to bring it back to our birth chart, we want to see, okay, but what is Pluto actually doing in my own life? And one of the best ways to look at that is through the birth chart. So stick with me here. Don't get intimidated. If you don't know your birth chart, you can go into the description box, click on the link. Then you want to type in your birthday, your birth time, and your birth location. Click through and have a look at the page. Again, stick with me, go down to the bottom of the page and where you will see your planets as well as the sign they're in and the degrees. And the degrees are really important here with the outer planets. The degrees have to be almost exact for it to have a real impact. And if you have planets at 0 to 5 degrees of Aquarius, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 27, 28, 29 degrees Capricorn, then you may have experienced a type of ego death in your life, a type of destructive transmutation that really had to make you rethink some of the ideologies that you had in your life. And say, for example, you're a Leo rising, this would be happening in your 7th house of relationships. And what we're seeing then is a major shift in the way that you understand how you relate to people, maybe significant changes in your relationships. And this is a slow moving process. It didn't happen overnight. So while we are witnessing a collective change in the themes that I just mentioned, we also want to bring it back to our own life because that's where we can actually affect change. And the things that we're doing at a day-to-day level in our own life is also influencing what's happening at this collective. So that's a little bit of an abstract thought, but that's the theory. So with this Pluto energy, it's going to be shifting through 2029 still. It's still going to be having this upheaval. Is that going to affect you the entire time? Of course not. We've got to get more specific about the chart. But if you've been experiencing some type of upheaval in your life, and it has a sort of ego, death, destruction quality to it, it may very much correlate to Pluto, especially if you have identified this in your birth chart. The second generational planet is Neptune entering Aries, which began around March of 2025, kind of in and out until making landfall in January 2026, so officially in Aries. And this is a 165-year orbit, so we are not going to see Neptune in Aries ever again in our lifetime. And the spirit of this transit has a lot to do with our radical belief systems. It has to do with the things that connect us to our higher selves. Somehow it has to do with our creative energy and our creative spirit. And it also coincided with an important 36-year transit, which was about breaking those things down. So we see here a breaking down of some type of belief system, of something that we once connected to. And you can see that happening in the world, but then we want to bring it back to our own life. So for example, if you go to your birth chart and you see, do I have any planets or important degrees, like my ascendant degree at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 Aries, or 27, 28, 29 Pisces, then maybe in the last few years, 2023 to the end of 2026, you will be, or you will have had an experience where there has been an incredible creative surge, but also something which is about restraining yourself or breaking things down and reconstructing them in a different way. And maybe there has even been some confusion around what exactly is the correct direction. What do I actually believe in? Has it cast a doubt on your beliefs? So there's a lot of intricate experiences that happen under this particular transit. But again, it's within a certain amount of time. And if you fall under the category for your birth chart, then you might have been particularly experiencing this between 2023 until the end of 2026. For example, if you are a Cancer rising and your moon is at 0 degrees of Aries, then you might feel a sort of heaviness or a weight right now emotionally where you're not entirely sure which direction you're going in or what you truly believe in. Maybe you've had some health challenges. If you're an Aries rising person and you have planets or your ascendant degree at 0 to 4 degrees of Aries, then you may be undergoing a massive identity shift, really rethinking how it is you connect to yourself on a daily level, on a spiritual level. And again, we also have to tie it back to what Neptune represents in your chart. So that's going to be very chart specific. So while we see a collective sort of dissolution with some of these structures that are in place happening around us, we always have to bring it back to our birth chart because that's where we're actually going to be able to affect change. And from this point on, you'll be able to rebuild your belief system, focus on that area of life that really needs attention and nurturing in order for you to come out of the other side of this transit with a clear sense of what you do believe in, how you do connect to your higher self. And the last planet is Uranus in Gemini. And this began in July of 2025, officially making landfall April of 2026. So starting the 26th of this month, we are going to see that hypersonic speed pick up at least through 2029 in this kind of intensity. And Uranus is interesting because it's an 84-year orbit, which means that if we're lucky, we actually get one full Uranus cycle. And it's a planet classically associated with disruption, change, and unpredictability. So when it enters Gemini, which is about information and how we consume it, how we communicate with people, telecommunications, and is also somehow related to this technological revolution, we see a disruption, a further disruption in those areas. And because of its unpredictable nature, it always makes things a little bit more challenging to understand. it's very difficult to really understand how Uranus is going to behave in any given situation. However, what I would say is it never is unpredictable just for the sake of being unpredictable. So if you bring it back to your birth chart, you can see, do I have planets at 0 to 5 degrees of Gemini? So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Gemini, or 27, 28, 29 Taurus. And if you do have those placements, you'll see some part of your life may have been really undergoing a substantial amount of disruption. And especially in the period that we're discussing, which is 2023 to the end of 2026. So this disruption is not for the sake of disruption. It's a type of wake-up call. It's a type of invitation to individuate in some fashion. So for example, if you are a Virgo rising, then you may be experiencing or have had experienced a lot of disruptions to your career. And in that case, maybe you couldn't hold down a job. Maybe you suddenly got an amazing offer that you couldn't turn down, but you're already so deep into your own current work that it's hard to imagine to get out of that. There can be any number of curveballs, both positive or negative for that matter, that come up under this transit. And with Uranus entering Gemini, it is an invitation to really ask yourself, is this the work that I want to do? Am I truly passionate about it? Is this the work that's meaningful for me? And again, we always have to take the interpretations of what else is happening in your birth chart, but that's a general idea of how to use it. So in this way, we can see, yes, there is a collective energy, there is a change at a technological level, at a communications level, but then we always want to bring it back to our own experience, because it's there that we need to see, where is that wake-up call actually happening. The more that we can affect the change in our lives, the more that we can also affect the change collectively, and the less abstract it becomes. So we've talked about these 3 generational planets at a collective level, and hopefully you've been able to see whether it has aligned with your personal birth chart. However, if you haven't, just note that between 2026 to 2029, we're still in this supersonic speed phase, and those planets are going to transit into 10 degrees of Aries, Gemini, Aquarius. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that the probability that you will be affected and experience some fundamental shifts and some changes in your life is high, due to the fact that these planetary changes are happening all at the same time. And the other thing is that we want to remember it is not happening within a 6-year period in such intensity. What we're going to experience is a bell curve. And the more that we can be specific about the area of our life, whether it's a change at home, whether it's a change at work, or a change in health, the more we're able to really tackle it and be specific and not get overwhelmed by the collective chaos narrative that is also very easily accessible. The other part that I want to mention is that there have been instances in history where we have had planets in fire and air signs. 1981 to 1983, 71 to 74, 1943 to 49. So if you're born within that time period, then you may feel the shifts coming quickly for you, because you already have a lot of that fire and air energy. It's a little bit more than I want to go into in today's video, but I'm also just sort of identifying that there are many ways in which people are going to be experiencing this, both at a personal level and at a collective level. And of course, the thing here is that we want to accept that we are in this period of change, and that we will be in a period of change for the next few years, especially at this speed. So hopefully with this video, you've been able to understand what is a generational planet, how can we relate it back to our birth chart, and why is that important? And also as a reminder that the 26th of April is that final transition that began in 2023. It's the end of the transition and the beginning of a potent period that will last until around April 2029. And while this collective shift is really important, the more that we can bring it back to what's actually needing change, what's needing a revolution and a radical shift in our own life, the more ready we will be to navigate these transits.